but he's able to makes it win anything. Sam, defend your team, because they haven't won. Big opportunity for Sentinels.
Strap yourselves in, it's another 1 hour episode.
Oh yeah.
Spike defused.
Welcome to Press 4 to Defuse, your weekly spot for Valorant esports news and also discussion. I'm Darth Mike. We got the usual cast on today. We got Sam and we got Paul. Sam, how you feeling? This is 2 weeks in a row on the show. Is that allowed?
No, it's not.
No,
it's not. I wasn't here last week.
It's 1 week.
And I won't be here next week.
It's 1 week. We're just gonna get like a big cutout of you. Actually, Cody, can you just clip her screen right now, and then we'll just leave that up.
Perfect.
And we'll throw questions to you. Leave just a pause, and then be like, "Yep, great input, Sam. Great input, Sam," and move on. That's how we'll deal with.
You
the
say that
EMEA
like
news.
you don't do that all the time, though. What?
Yeah, I mean that's what we'll do with the EMEA news. We'll just bounce to your still image,
God.
or we could do like a South Park thing where we just cut your head in half and have it like bounce up and down.
Oh, that would be great.
We
now
can
I'm
make
a
this happen.
Terrence
Like Philippine,
Philip
yeah,
puppet?
exactly.
Yeah, or Jib Jab from
Perfect.
back in the 2000s.
That is terrible.
That's what I'm hoping for. Paul, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, man. Iceland's around the corner. Like Gamechangers is in full swing. There's a lot to talk about, and that's like the actual tournaments. We got news before that too, Mike. And oh boy,
Yeah.
there's been a
boy,
lot going on.
indeed.
Yeah, it's fun. It's speaking of which, nice segue in here. Let's get into our Run It Back segment presented by Temple University, where we talk about the news from the last week. And there is some juicy news indeed here, folks. This one's a biggie. 100 Thieves completely remaking their roster, it seems. New roster would be allegedly,
yeah.
according to rumors from the Geeties himself. Allegedly, Asuna sticking around, Bang sticking around, and then new additions, Derek, Will, and Stellar. No Hiko, no Ethan. This is...
Why is Will a name I don't recognize?
Because he's only played with BBG and like some other random things. He's
some smaller.
new name.
Oh.
Definitely
Yeah,
sort of a relatively unknown player.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do we make of this roster?
I
Paul,
mean,
you want to open it up? Yeah.
Yeah, the first thing you have to preface this with is like we cover rumors on this show because, you know, a lot of the time they end up being true anyways. This is definitely one of the more rumors. If you read the article, it's like 100 Thieves were seen practicing with this lineup, right?
Yeah.
Like it's like one scrim that we're going off of, or like a couple of scrims or something like that. I assume there's more behind the scenes as well. Otherwise, Giddy's probably isn't going to be tweeting about it, right? But this is a very rumor, and nothing is in stone yet. It would be a massive upheaval brand-wise, but it's also cool to see to a degree, right? Because you have to keep in mind with 100 Thieves, they've got DDK and Sean Garris coming in recently, right? So for them to be at least looking at massive moves like this, we know for a fact they've been handed the power. It's not a player-decided team anymore. And enough power to get one of the like main brand stays potentially off the roster,
Yeah.
right? With Hiko.
I want to
It's
split this
interesting.
into two parts, right? Because obviously that's a conversation where we're going to talk about the reduction of Hiko and Ethan. For now, let's focus on this new roster because I think it is spicy.
Sure.
Stellar obviously was previously of LG. I presume he'd be coming in as the caller, as the in-game leader, since that's what he did previously on that Luminosity roster, and that's probably what you're looking to bring him on for in specific. He's since floated around and played with a few different teams, had some trials as well, I think, but I don't think he's stuck onto a roster. I don't think he's been contracted since then. So that's an interesting one for me. He's a CS guy. He's someone I've known for a long time who has a pretty good brain for games in general. And I think it could be an interesting one. We've also got MC in chat saying
I was
Will
just
is
about to
good
say.
+1.
Hey, MC.
So
That's all we need to know.
You got the
MC
Matthew C.
seal
Elmore
of approval.
vouch. Matt vouch. Well, I mean, literally when we had Matt on the show last week, he was talking about
He was talking about a bunch of players,
and how much he pays attention to players and looks into them.
Yeah.
So it is actually a very,
I mean, that's valid given the whole trend thing.
Yeah, it's definitely a very weighty vouch to have as a player
exactly.
early on here. And then Bang was already connected to this team, and Derek has been connected to this team for a little while here. Obviously, Asuna is a stud.
Yeah.
That one's been borne out by evidence. How are you feeling about this roster, Sam?
Oh, okay. Go for it,
Paul
Sam.
off.
I was just going to say Derek was one of the better parts of Rise. Go,
Yes.
Sam. Quick.
Oh yeah, I mean, Derek actually is one of the old Overwatch people. I don't think he ever made it like huge, but I remember he was known for his McCree, so it seems unsurprising he'd go into like a proper first-person shooter because that's probably the most shooty hero. I nearly said agent. It's really difficult keeping up with all the terminology, but yeah. So I've always enjoyed Derek's play. I know that there has been some controversy around him, which does leave me with a few question marks. But aside from that, I think he's really like a good player. So good pickup there. Stella, I don't know, the whole LG thing, like everything that happened there was always so messy. It never felt like anything had a really solid direction. So I'm hoping now in a really like stable environment with the likes of DDK and Sean Garris, like we were talking about a little bit earlier on, a little bit better room to shine. And I'm curious to find out if Will is going to become the next Trent. Not quite to the same degree, obviously.
Let's not go too far yet.
Well,
Oh yeah, what are your
the same degree, 'cause
expectations
he
in
hasn't
your
come out of
roster?
nowhere,
Just become
but-
like the best. Just be the best. You know, not high expectations at all. Just
to be
the
fair,
best. Be
that's
the
what
best.
happened with Trent. He rocked up on the roster and he was like, you know what, I'm just going to be the best.
But that's what I'm
So-
saying. By
How many
comparing him
Trents do
to
we
Trent,
get,
that's
though?
the expectation you're creating here, Sam. You're like, yeah, you know, it's interesting to see if he'll be like the best at what he does. Like, you know, he's one of the best. Yeah. No, that would certainly be interesting. I do think it's I now let's talk about the implications, right? Let's talk about the implications of what this means in terms of Sean and DDK coming into the roster. Yeah, don't you know you're the new coach
I'm
of
the
100
coach of
Thieves?
100 Thieves, yeah. It was me all along.
Damn, so much for stability in that role.
But genuinely, it is very interesting, right? Because one of the things about this team is this has been Hiko's team, really, for as long as it's existed. He was on the team with 4 PUBG players. That was their original one. And then they cut all 4 PUBG players because they were like, yeah, well, this didn't work. And they said, okay, Hiko, build your team. And it was Hiko's team, and it's been Hiko's team from an outside perspective, really since its inception. And that hasn't worked for them lately. So obviously you bring in Sean and DDK. They're being given the keys, right? You don't pay whatever large amount of money Sean and DDK are going to demand to be like, yeah, if Hiko says it's all right. You give them the keys to the team. They have roster control. They build the team to their vision. And one of the things that you're going to run into with a new coach, with a new team, with a new, anything is getting buy-in from your players. Now,
Yep.
Hiko is an interesting one because Hiko was once upon a time Sean's teammate, if I'm not mistaken. I think they played together on C9. And that means that there's an interesting relationship there, right? They are or have been through much of their career equals, teammates, on a level. It's a transition to have this kind of authority role. And maybe visions didn't align for what this team was going to be. Maybe visions didn't align for what Hiko's role was going to be. Maybe they just didn't like the way Hiko plays the game. Or maybe, if you're going to run a team and you're going to have a team be a little more coaching focused and unitary focused and all that kind of stuff, old, established, intractable, powerful voices might be better off removed so you can create a more unified vision.
Or this could just be a test and, kind of showing, hey, Hiko, we will consider at least getting rid of you if we need to, right?
Nah, I bet
like at the very you think this is
I think Ethan could be on the final roster. I think Hiko's gone.
Maybe one of them was just sick on the day that they were scrimming, and so
that's another
entirely
thing,
possible.
right?
It's entirely possible.
That's literally it could be
it's
two
entirely
of those players
possible.
are tried out.
Hiko had a cold,
Hiko
guys.
was moving or in a meeting. Like literally, there's so much that could be going on behind the scenes. We're just speculating wildly at this point. But
if I will put it this way. If their positions in the roster were 100% secured, it would already have been denied.
True. Exactly.
And it hasn't been. And the people associated with it, the people who work at 100 Thieves, Sean, DDK, understand how optics work. And if it was 100% confirmed that Ethan and Hiko were on this roster and not getting swapped out, there would already be a denial.
Yeah.
100%.
At the very least, the whole roster is in limbo. Except like Asuna, but he's cracked, so
Oh, someone just said in the chat something about Hiko having internet issues.
That's also possible.
That's
right?
convenient. Convenient timing.
Very
Players
convenient,
have never obfuscated the truth when it's embarrassing to them. No one has
Especially
ever
with
done
using
that.
internet issues as an excuse.
PC died. Sad.
Yeah, that's a classic. I've experienced a lot of sudden internet issues in North American Counter-Strike a couple years ago before they all came to this game. Anyway, not this roster. I want to clarify.
Yeah.
Well, no.
Anyways.
I don't think anyone on this roster.
Anyways.
But anyways, it is very interesting. I am curious to see what Ethan winds up doing. Whether Ethan is part of this roster, whether Ethan, obviously they move on from Ethan. He's another one who's a much more veteran voice than anyone else associated with this project, right? Not in the same way that Hiko is. The tenure is vastly different. Ethan's of the generation that would have come into competitive FPS looking up to Sean Garrett. So that relationship is presumably potentially different. But they're both set, established pros who, could be set in their ways, set in their mentality, set in their ideas of the way a roster should work, and that might not mesh or vibe with the vision that DDK and Sean have for the team. In which case, yeah, they gotta go. Even if they're good players and could be good individuals, if they're gonna mess with the flow or the dynamics or the mentality or whatever, you gotta move on.
And then there's a whole. Hiko at least like worst case scenario, he'll pivot to full-time streaming. Hiko's going to be fine, right? If this move even ends up
that was always going to be Hiko's end game at some point. I don't know whether that's now or whether that's the next move.
Yeah, so, we'll wait and see.
I'm sure he can find another team, I'm sure. Like, the name
if he wants to,
will get him opportunities.
Then it's can you match his quote, though? Because Hiko is not going to be a cheap pickup.
I heard a rumor at one point about what he was making in Valorant and just...
I can only imagine, man.
Large numbers, folks, per month. But anyway, suffice it to say, this is really interesting. It's going to be interesting to see what the final roster is and what the announcement will be.
Yeah.
But I would love it, to be honest. I would just love it's a new regime. Keep one piece, move on.
Sure.
The one thing that I'm not sure of, I don't think this is a T1 roster. I think they have really good players, some of them T1 level, but I don't think that this
Well,
is a
okay.
T1 roster.
How are we defining T1 though? Are we defining like you're going to international events as Tier 1, or you've made your local, like your like regional VCT as Tier 1?
I think that
okay.
I think the
Because
first
those
question
are
is
vastly different things.
No,
yeah,
those are
does
very
this team
different.
qualify for the next challengers?
I would hope so.
I think challenges, sure.
think
Challenges,
so.
sure, but
I would think so.
Does this team make challenges playoffs?
That's
Matt
maybe a bit
wants
more
to know who's
questionable.
gonna play.
See, that's where the problem is. I don't think so.
MC
Maybe
in
with
chat
some
wants to know
time.
who's going to play Smokes or Sentinels on this team.
If Stella
Wow.
plays Sentinel, who's playing Smokes? That's another good question. I'm not super familiar with what roles Will plays.
Well, apparently Will's status is unknown, so maybe he's not the final one.
Stella's
There's
played
a whole lot of
of
speculation.
Chamber over the last 60 days, but also a lot of Killjoy and Viper. So I guess that Stellar winds up
We've
getting stuck
spent
on towards the
15
Sentinel
minutes talking about.
role. All right, we're
Hunger
moving
Games.
on. We're moving on. It's a juicy
What was it?
rumor. We're
Interesting.
moving on. But this is very curious. This is
Yeah.
very
interesting.
curious. We're moving on. TSM. This is another one of the rosters. They're set to sign Guimond and Seven, apparently, which will complete out their team. So
That makes sense.
how do we feel about the squad, Paul?
I mean, they played with 7 before, right?
Yep.
Looked pretty all right considering it seemed to be somewhat of a last minute kind of thing. I think it's the right direction for TSM to as they pivot away from like a Wardell centric team, right? Which they were.
Yeah.
Calling it how it was rather. I think Seven is a really good jet player. I think he gives you a little bit more flexibility than Wardell did too, right? Because he actually plays entry on jet instead of just full opping the entire time, right? And GMD is maybe a little bit more interesting, right, Guimond? Just because Gen G hasn't had the best performances as of late, obviously still a good player with a lot of pedigree, and I wouldn't be surprised if he did really well on TSM, but that one is definitely of the two, that one is the one I am more curious about, but it still makes sense in the roster. I wouldn't hate to see this. Not sure if they would, we were talking about 100 Thieves qualifying. I think this pushes TSM closer to qualifying, but there are still a lot of really good teams right at that kind of cusp in NA.
Yeah, I think that's kind of how I'm feeling about a lot of these roster moves. I mean, I was saying before we started the show, like a lot of this is just like, oh, that looks like a good direction thing. Let's see if it actually does anything. And I think that's how I'm really feeling is a case of like every team is trying to push the envelope. Every team is trying to, close that gap. And there are a lot of good players. And it's going to take more than just shuffling your roster around to get those results. And now more than ever, the teams that are sticking and making necessary adjustments within the 5 that they have are likely going to be doing better, unless obviously there's something really egregious that you have to deal with. But if you're just like, oh, we did badly in one game, now we're going to ship our player back to EU, then you're unlikely to be getting the results that you want. It's the teams that are now sticking together and trying to find that synergy that are going to be doing better. So for right now, the roster moves, looks good. We'll see if it actually is good.
All right. I'm going to come in here and throw a whole bunch of water on this excitement party. I think these are bad roster moves. I don't think TSM is going to fix their issues, and I think they're going to continue to be bad. And here's why I think that. Nothing against Guimond as an individual player. I think he has talent. But he's boys with Sabrosa. The reason he's joining this roster, I would assume, or at least got connected with this roster, is that he and Sabrosa are very old friends. They're both French-Canadian. They came up playing CS together. Like, they came up on the same rosters. They cut their teeth together and came up through. I think there's talent there for Guimond, but the fact that they're bringing in Guimond and Seven tells me that TSM doesn't necessarily understand the issues that they had with their old team. Because Seven is a very mechanically gifted player who isn't refined and needs to develop, is what I've seen and heard. Right? That seems to have been the issues in previous teams. Things like decision makings, working on that. Right? Everyone praises the mechanics, but maybe there's room to grow. Now, that's fine if you're an org that's capable of developing talent and developing players.
That's the trick.
TSM hasn't necessarily done that yet, right? Their original team was a bunch of very experienced players from CS. Maybe they hadn't had the highest of highs in CS, but they didn't need to be taught how to play games. They haven't had anyone shine like that, right? Aleko, who's out of the roster, who was previously known as Leviathan, was the last guy who was supposed to do that, right? Who was supposed to that super high ceiling player where it was exciting at the beginning, and then it didn't really go anywhere with it, right? And they're cutting bait on it, which tells me that didn't develop in the way they were hoping. They've gone through a couple other people like this. So the fact that they're signing a mechanical ceiling player who you need to work on, combined with the fact that they're bringing in Sabrosa's buddy, tells me it's not an insult towards either individual player, but it tells me that it's not. I don't think TSM is changing their philosophy, right?
Sure.
I don't think that. I think that the Guimond edition tells me that Sabrosa probably still has a strong amount of influence into roster decisions, which was one of the issues with the old team, was that it seemed to be very player-led and didn't necessarily always have a direction as a result, an overarching eye onto it. The reason they removed Wardell is Wardell didn't want to move in with the rest of the team. Do I think getting them all in the same place and having them able to practice and scrim together will improve things? Absolutely. 100%. I think being in Texas as a unit will improve the team. But do I think that it addresses some of the fundamental culture fits that seem to exist within this roster from an outside perspective? No, I don't think so. And I don't think they have an overarching vision still. And I don't. So I'm very tepid on this squad. Maybe I get proved wrong, but based on the additions, I don't think they have done the soul searching that's going to be required of this team to be good. That's my hot take.
Sure.
Good take. Yeah.
Yeah.
I see someone in the chat asking, could it be part of the issue is that they couldn't get the players that they wanted, but needed to construct a reasonable team by next VCT? They've had a lot of time.
Yeah,
right?
I'd be surprised. They've known they were
there's been a
rebuilding
lot
this
of
team
time.
for a while, and TSM has big money and big branding.
Yeah.
Which tends to be very alluring for players. Now, admittedly, the roster hasn't done that well, so that brand name has maybe taken a hit in players' eyes where you'd rather join a successful team.
Yeah.
But it's still TSM, man, right? Like,
Yeah.
I know they've been getting hammered for being terrible, apparently, behind the scenes in various aspects and all that stuff.
In front of the
But
scenes.
it's still
Just-
TSM. If you're a young 18-year-old Valorant kid and you see that TSM wants to sign you, that is real
Sure.
hard to pass up. Moving on. We'll move on because
Yeah.
we do need to get going. There's a lot of news to talk about this week, so we'll try to
True.
blow through some of this.
And we're still gonna get to
NYXL,
Masters.
new team, Jonas out, Lear out, Vice
Yeah, everybody's
bench,
gone.
Mummy bench. There's literally one player they're retaining. Also, I just want to say real quick, their logo freaks me out. It's super weird,
Yeah,
and I don't
it's
like
terrifying.
I don't know
It's
what
just
the
like-
hell's
But
going
But
on.
also,
Why?
just like, okay, so you decided you're a New York team, so you're gonna make your logo splitting the Statue of Liberty's head in half. That doesn't feel very
Is that
like
what it is?
New
Is that
York
not just
friendly.
like a mosque?
Yeah, no, it's
No,
the
it's
Statue
a
of
skull
Liberty
mosque.
getting
It's
its
the
skull
statue,
split in
yeah.
half, so the skull's
It's-
exposed. It's weird, man. It's weird.
What?
Yeah,
It's a weird logo for an esports team, especially since they're called the
That's a weird logo for anyone.
NYFU. Like, does it stand for
NYFU.
something?
Oh my god.
Or are they just
Oh
like,
my
hey, the
God.
NYXL is cool, so let's make the
that's
NY,
terrible.
FU.
That's just terrible.
Does it stand for something? I haven't found what it stands
That's
for
a
yet.
good question. I'm
Subliminal
not
messaging,
sure.
boys.
I mean, clearly it's like
NY.
yes, they have to know that it's the NY fuck you and that they're trying to be edgy with this logo and everything. But it's just, I don't know.
Yeah, it's
I
uncomfortable
vibe
to
with
look
it.
at, man.
I find the logo more interesting than the roster shuffle because at this point, I mean, like about
Yeah.
damn time.
Yeah,
So-
Andbox had been slowly, well, not even slow. Andbox had been nowhere in pretty much
Honestly.
in like
Yeah.
like small tournaments. They were getting blasted out of like the rounds of 16 a lot of the time by like pug teams.
Oh, it's apparently
I
a
li-
New York Fury.
The
Yeah,
New York
we knew
Fury.
that.
Oh, that
I
makes
didn't know
sense.
that.
Yeah,
I
no,
just
yeah,
kept
yeah.
seeing
How did
NYFU. I definitely saw it at some
We
point and
spoke
then
about
just
it.
put it out
What?
of my brain. I'm
Oh
dumb.
my
Well,
God.
And
Okay.
I mean, look, I like a lot of the players on that roster, right? I think Jonah Six, I think Mummy, they're both really great players specifically. But something wasn't working.
Yeah.
I hope that the rebrand and the rebuild comes with a
I mean, it's a studs up. We can't judge it.
investment of money, right?
We can't judge it until we see it, right? Like,
Yeah,
We don't
they
know.
just-
There's-
we don't know what's going on.
They're
Is
just-
anyone
they
on this
just-
team right now?
it's a full teardown.
No.
It's a full teardown. So, anyways, we'll move on.
Yep. Good plan.
We'll move on here. What do we have next? Oh, Ghost are set to sign a proto. We'll just do this one real quick. I like a proto. I'm sad he hasn't been on a
Yeah.
roster for so very long. I'm happy to
Mhm.
see him back on a roster.
About damn
Hell yeah.
time.
Boom, boom, keep moving. That was to replace Ryan, by the way. So that's an interesting
sad,
piece
yeah.
since Ryan was doing the calling for the squad.
Yep.
boom, moving on. Ascend. Get rid of Kyle's.
Yeah. This is an interesting one though, because now I'm really mad about this. So literally in February, they came out and said, we're going to put all the rumors to rest. We've re-signed all of our players for the next year. And in the last couple of weeks, they have benched both Bone Cold and Kyle's.
Mhm.
The two of them are now locked into their contract for the next 10 months unless someone buys them out. Like,
assuming
this
that they don't
pisses me
have,
off.
assuming they don't have exit clauses, which most players should. I mean, it just depends on how the contract structure. It's always hard to know behind the scenes. But yeah, it probably sucks for them. They're probably in contract jail for a year.
It's not going to be very easy for them to get onto another team. Like they can't just go like join a pug team very easily, or another roster very easily. But you know what I mean.
I'm assuming it's a situation where I think we were talking about this last week, where there were issues within this roster before champs.
Yeah, there were.
And then winning cures all. And so obviously you're not going to break up a roster that just won an international event, right?
And
like
then,
you
then
won,
losing,
you're not going to change
losing
it.
breaks all when they
and
aren't
so you're
able
like,
to do much in VCT.
Oh, this is great. Sign everyone. And then yeah, it turns out those issues were real. And then suddenly, oh boy, yeah, maybe we do need to bench some people and rebuild some stuff.
Yeah.
So I get it, but we'll keep rolling here because we do need to keep rolling. Emil was out of Mouse for personal reasons. I just wanted to touch on this because it's a weird thing to have a tweet that says I'm out for personal reasons, but also I'm immediately looking for offers. That, like, what personal reason would you have to need to leave a roster but immediately join another roster?
It's got to be something internal.
It's got to be, right? Like somebody's not getting along.
Yeah, it's
right?
weird. It's a really weird way to phrase that. From his perspective, and I don't know, the messaging's just odd on it, but we will move on from that one unless anyone has really hot mouse takes that they need to get out.
Not
All
really,
right,
no.
We'll keep rolling. Spend way too much time already because that's what we do.
We
here.
spent a quarter of the show on our
That's what we do
again.
here. Fanatics, Durka, and Brave, but apparently maybe Durka might be able to come through. Obviously, the Brave situation.
Oh God, what a
he was. He got exposed for messaging some suspect opinions on the situation in Ukraine, shall we say.
Yeah.
So
there's a lot more to that. Like the way he tells the story,
There is.
it was before the invasion started and he wasn't fully informed, and now he is, and people are now trying to take this out of context and make old messages that he's grown from make it seem like this is the kind of person he still is. So there's more to the story than that. But I suppose the big point of that is, and even if that hadn't happened, he can't go to Iceland anyway.
Yeah,
so
can't
that's
get a visa.
neither here nor there. But
can't
he's
get
not going
a
to be there.
visa. So now it seems like Durka might actually be there. He's tested negative. He supposedly has a negative lab test as well, so might be able to attend the event and compete with his team. Is that confirmed or
not yet? Not yet.
I mean, there hasn't been like an official statement by a team. The way Durka was talking on Twitter makes it seem like he was going to be on his way to Iceland. I don't know. Even if he is on his way to Iceland, I don't know when he'll get there. Right?
Yeah.
Matches start in 4 days. Right? You got to arrange travel and everything, and then. Maybe Durka gets there the day of and is jet lagged, and we still have whoever playing in his place. Is it Hibber?
Matt's gonna
okay.
put him stick him
on,
in the
man.
airport.
You'll stop him at the airport. You might need to, right? Well, and we'll touch on this a little bit later, but Durka has been like performing like a monster. As of
dude,
late.
seriously,
and he's
so
always gotten better on land too, like historically for Fnatic. So like Durka
it will be big stinky poo poo for them.
It'd be huge if he can play. Hopefully he can. Hopefully it's not going to be that much of an issue. Firoth coming in, I don't think that's necessarily a huge downgrade either, right?
Not really. I mean, he's pretty good.
Firoth's pretty good.
Brave.
So, I mean, Brave obviously was really phenomenal. Was playing really well on Fnatic. Political opinions aside, whether they're old or whatever. But like Firoth isn't terrible, and I have a lot of faith in like the structure of Fnatic to at least get him partially up to speed to fill that role.
I will say also, I do want to say something. I'm maybe going to stick my foot in it, but you know what? I'm going to stick my foot in it because I do think it's actually a reasonable take.
Oh boy.
With the Brave thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a shit opinion. I'm just going to start with that. Terrible thing to think about the, an unprovoked invasion of a country. Like, but he's a young dude, right? Who lives in Russia, where almost all media at this point is state media. Yep. There are massive amounts of propaganda that tell a version of the story that is not reality. And
Yep.
so while he is also a very online person who may have access to those resources, there's a lot of messaging around that runs contrary to the narrative that we have here.
Absolutely.
So what I will say is, young guy can learn, can grow, can change opinions.
Yes.
I think that totally, ending the career over this is probably a little premature kind of thing. Obviously, situation with visas is going to mean that Russian players probably aren't going anywhere for a long time, to be quite frank. So it's probably a non-issue in that regard. But I think that hopefully for Brave, this is an opportunity to maybe have eyes opened to other realities and the reality of the situation, what's happening in Ukraine.
For sure.
So that's my take. I think it's reasonable
Agreed.
enough. So
Yeah, if you stuck your foot in it there, I will put my foot in with you.
Yeah.
Because that is a
Feels
very
like a reasonable thing.
reasonable
I'm not putting my foot anywhere,
nuance
but
to the situation.
it's a terrible, terrible, terrible situation what is happening in Ukraine.
Yeah, absolutely.
The Russian people are not a monolith. The Russian government is certainly perpetrating heinous acts right now.
Very true.
And the military, but there is potential for nuance in these things. But anyways, back to the Valorant. It will be substantially better for Fnatic if they can get Dirk in there. Obviously.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Not having both of them puts Fnatic at like the bottom of my tier list, not gonna lie.
I
I can at least get one of them, they're further up.
I
but-
put them straight down. I put them way down in my power rankings. But we'll keep moving here. I was assuming no Durka. It definitely changes with Durka, but we'll keep moving here. This is Sam. FPX are so this is the news that you put in here. FPX are getting circuit points as if they finished last at the tournament. Liquid get their full points for whatever their placement is.
Yeah. This irritates me because it's going to affect FPX's circuit points for the rest of the year. Now, I do understand that there is a lot that needs to be considered because of the situation that's going on. But I feel, and maybe this is like terrible, maybe everyone's going to hate me for saying this, but like Liquid did not deserve to be there. So the fact that they're getting the full points for competing, to me, just it leaves a bad taste in my mouth. Like, yes, they are going to compete. They're going to place where they place and they're going to work hard at it, of course. But they don't deserve to be. They didn't get in. That's not their spot. And now FPX are going to be down to like, they won EMEA. They are the best team in the EMEA. And they're going to be at best ranked 4th because they can't get their circuit points. Like, I feel like a bigger concession could have been made here.
Well,
I understand it's tough, but holy.
Here's my question though, right? This is so the idea behind these circuit points is to have the best teams competing at champs at the end of the year. That's your idea. So if Liquid win Reykjavik, if they win the whole dang event, they are one of the best teams of the year, right? Like they deserve to have a circuit point standing that reflects that to have the champs. So if you're going to say like they wouldn't get their circuit points for having not qualified, what if they win? Right? We'll look like idiots then if they win the event and suddenly one of your Masters winners doesn't have the points they would have gotten for winning and doesn't have that chance at champs in the same way. So it's a tough situation, and I think giving FPX the minimum points at least does give them something.
And the flip side of that is Liquid could totally just like fumble out of groups, right? Like they could end up 12th, they could end up with barely any circuit points, and this decision hardly even matters in the long run of things, right? So I think while it is a little bit rough, and it makes like circuit points a little bit weird at the end of the year too, because now you'll have like an extra infusion for EMEA specifically, so it'll be harder for teams that didn't end up in internationals to qualify. I don't think there's another way you could do this where it wouldn't just totally screw over both of these teams, right? Like, you're obviously not going to take points away from FPX, and while they could have placed higher, unfortunately the reality is like we're just never going to know. We're just never going to know, and it wouldn't make sense to just award them more circuit points than the 8th place that they would have gotten automatically. And for Liquid, they get a chance to recover from what was a really rough playoffs from them. They get graced by a little bit of luck, sure. You got to be good and you got to be lucky to be the best, though. So they got to be good to actually get the points that will matter at the very end of the year. And there's another Masters event and a last chance qualifier too. So while it's an uncomfortable situation, I think this is as fine as I can't think of a better scenario for everyone involved, right?
Yeah. I think the issue is, like, I understand the logic of they just get the points and then they can earn the prize money, but they get the points they would have had if they, because they didn't technically qualify. But if you're right, you don't want to, if in the scenario where they win the thing, you don't want them to not have that chance to make champs, because you want your Masters winners to be at the end of the year event.
Well, and that would just be a mess too, right? Yep. Like because then the reaction from the community is the exact opposite, right? Like, oh, Liquid, it doesn't matter how bad they did in playoffs. Look how they did at Reykjavik. They learned and they got better, and now they're not getting points. That would be horrendous.
It is also just a situation where you don't want teams at the event to have different levels of motivation for the event.
That is also true.
I just, for the one person in chat that wasn't aware of this, so yeah, FPX are not able to compete because obviously a lot of their players are Russian. They would only be able to play or to field 2 of their main roster, and by Riot rules, you must be able to field 3. So unfortunately, they had to give up their spot.
So
yeah, sucks.
Shitty situation.
Big sad there.
Shitty situation, unfortunately.
This is a huge argument for substitutes.
Sure,
still part of the roster.
Yeah. I mean, even then, though, right? Like,
but
at least FPX would get to play, but it would hardly be FPX at that point.
Yeah.
I think it is tough to structure your roster rules and team composition around unprovoked LAN wars in Europe. Right?
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
Hopefully, we don't get a lot of those.
Yeah.
Just in case Russia gets pissed, we should have some more players. Yeah.
Hopefully, this one resolves itself.
Are they? Apparently, sub rules are difficult now anyway. So, there you go. That wouldn't have worked anyway.
There you go.
All right. Moving on here. We've got a couple more random points where we'll just bump through them. Munchkin is out of Crazy Raccoons. Crazy Raccoons making changes. I don't know if any of us have hot takes on this. Munchkin has been at a lot of international competition. All right, hit me with a little take, Paul. Quick, you get 30 seconds.
The small take is that Crazy Raccoons had a really rough performance in playoffs versus Zeta Division specifically. Zeta Division really performed well in their playoffs compared to pretty much the rest of the region, I would argue. I watched a few of those games, and Zeta Division were most of the time like hand and foot better. I don't know if Munchkin was the issue. When I was watching those games, Munchkin was playing fine based on the resources that were allocated to help him. I think there were a lot of other issues. I wonder if this is like a communication thing, or if this has to play into what the rumor.
Good shot. 30 seconds. I'm working on getting you guys briefer. All right, we're moving on. Anyways, is it communication? Is it individual performance? Anyways, we're moving on because we do have to.
Japan is supposedly importing SEA players.
That's
the last thing I have.
All
right. Next point before we move on. Riot allowed a player to sub in during VCT Gamechangers who's a man, a coach, because a player overslept the game. Now. To before we witch hunt someone for oversleeping, apparently they were dealing with a death in the family and grief and things like that. Yeah. So it is the rare situation where I do think oversleeping a game is more understandable. Normally, I
have no issue with that whatsoever. I have an issue with the fact that Riot said all-female non-binary tournament, somebody overslept, male coach wants to sub. Yeah, sure, why the hell not?
Yeah, they should have just been DQ'd.
I have a serious issue with that. That should be a forfeit. As per the rules of what would have happened to literally any other team, because it breaks like 3 different Game Changers rules. I have been molding out of the stratosphere about this. The worst part is that all that Riot have done is they've commented for Jess, who wrote this article, and said, oh yeah, it was an oversight, we'll try not to do that in the future. But there has been nothing else about it anywhere. No announcements, no admission outside of this one tiny little article. They're just like, oh, our bad. I'm so mad. They're like, we want to uplift women. They have created the tournament, the Caster Academy, they're throwing shit at the women's scene, and they're like, we want to uplift women. Oh, you have a slight inconvenience and you're an org roster? Sure, you can field a man. That's fine. I'm so mad.
Interestingly enough, I don't know the if this is true or not, but MCE is saying that in the chat he read somewhere that apparently Complexity tried to find a sub and an admin told them no, put
Yeah.
your coach in, and the coach did not want. If that is
That's
the
even
case,
worse.
that's so much worse.
That's so much
so
worse.
much worse.
And apparently Team X was so unhappy. They were like, why the hell are we playing against a man? Like, this is not okay. And it's not even about a skill
It's
thing.
super
Like, he could
weird.
be a bronze player for all I care. The point is,
And they lost the map
women
anyways.
tournament.
But yeah, and the real problem is like, you don't want this setting any sort of precedent in the future for anyone
Exactly.
making this argument, right? Like, this can't be a recurring thing, and for it to happen in like one of the biggest events, like pretty early on, I would say, relative to the Game Changers scene, right? You don't want this coming back to bite you later. It needs to be, all right, this was a one-time accident, and anytime in the future, boom, instant, here's our rule set. We're prepared for this situation now.
Yes.
And I feel like this happens so we talk about, like, I feel like once a month we talk about how Riot just had a tiny oversight in how they handled something in when it came to a ruling, and one admin made a mistake, and Riot goes, oopsie, we made the admin mistake, oopsie guys, sorry, and then like everybody's super mad about it because it was crazy. So like, this is getting ridiculous.
I mean, this is pretty clearly an admin error, right? Not the correct application of the situation, whether that's from the rule books or whether the rule book left room to interpretation and the admin made a bad call. I don't think, Riot's overarching direction on game changes is like, yeah, sure, whatever. He was a coach. That's fine. Like, I don't think it's gonna be. I don't think it's gonna be a situation that reoccurs. I think it was somebody panicked and wanted to get the games rolling and didn't want to full DQ a team because they had already DQ'd a map, I believe. But also per the substitute rules, they probably weren't allowed to go find a rando who wasn't previously registered with their team because that would be kind of unusual for a tournament, right?
Yeah.
So they probably should have just been full DQ'd, but someone panicked and didn't want to full DQ a team. And
I mean, and
I understand
fair enough. It would suck to full DQ a team from like the biggest like.
we
women's
gotta
event of the
we
year
gotta keep it
that
rolling,
has
Paul.
ever
We gotta
happened,
keep it
but,
rolling.
Absolutely.
Suffice it to
I
say,
was,
we're gonna keep it
I
rolling.
was done, Mike.
Yeah, but then you
Jeez.
launched back into it. You
Welcome
launched
to
back
my
into
hell
I
it.
had
hole.
one
Anyway,
tiny point.
We're gonna
Welcome.
move
I had
on.
one
You
tiny
guys are
point.
terrible
Every
at
time I
keeping
try to
it
talk
brief.
about
You're
EMEA.
so bad at keeping it brief. All right, let's go on. Let's talk about VCT Masters Reykjavik. The event, the big event. It's time. It's time for the Masters. Group stages are beginning. We got the two groups up, Group A and Group B. One of these groups does not look like the others. I'll say that right off the bat.
Yeah.
Does the group tend to consensus about the fact that I mean, my hot take is that Group B looks pretty dang stacked, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
that's not a hot take. That is
That's-
colder
that is-
than the Arctic is.
Feels like a room temp take.
Colder than
Like,
Iceland.
I mean, bro, like even the like quote unquote worst team in Group B, like you would argue is Xerxia, right? That's the
Yeah.
old X10 roster. They're still
Yep.
pretty good. I mean, they don't have Patapan anymore. I think they're gonna be last place in this group, but like they're still pretty good. Then you got Crew and Liquid rematching in like the first round, and then Optic gets their rematch versus X10, the team that knocked them out of groups at Champions, right? That's a spicy group.
Yeah,
Yup.
distinctly. It is a really spicy group. Crew is going to be the most interesting one, right? Because they were so
Yes.
good. They were so good in the last international stint, but they've had changes. The coach has been moved on over.
Yeah.
Whatever the heck happened there with good old coach Novaks. But suffice it to say, there are changes there. So last time there was such a surprise, such a shocker coming out of nowhere, and you're rolling over some teams. So are they going to be able to do that again? I think this group is so spicy.
I think Crew is still going to be really scary, specifically in best of threes. I think if you watch the finals from their region, you can get a little bit of a weird read because it's like close against a team that they should be like pretty better than. But like the maps that they were losing were maps where Crew just had the complete wrong idea, in my opinion, about like composition and role assignments on their team. And I think because, they're going to be in this group, they've already been scrimming in Iceland. On the Croupium, hopefully, as a team that wants to see Crew succeed, I will confess, I think scrimming in EMEA is going to knock a lot of those bad habits out of them. I don't think they're running the Phoenix on Haven anymore, or at least I hope they're not, right? Phoenix should be left dead in the water in his current state. unfortunately, as much as I love him. So I think Crew is still going to be really scary, and I have them getting out of this group.
Yeah. I mean, when I did my, we got asked to do our power rankings for like an article for NSG, and
Which
I
you can find
had
on nerdstreetgamers.com or just
Yay.
nerdstreet.com.
Nerdstreet, yeah. And I was like, so when I first sent it, it was like EMEA team, NA team, EMEA team, NA team, EMEA
Sure.
team, Crew. that was straight up my ranking. Okay, then the Fnatic stuff happened and they dropped down. I think I dropped them to like between Liquid and Crew, or possibly under Crew.
Sure.
But I mean, Crew is like way up there because they performed so well. I feel like the NA and EMEA teams have really stepped up a lot, though. Particularly the ones
That
that
is very true.
have been sent, like Optic and the Guard. I'll be honest, even as an EMEA fan, and I'll never admit this anywhere else, but I'm scared, especially with the fact that FPX haven't been able to go, and Fnatic are looking like they're probably not going to be able to compete properly, and Liquid always choke on LAN. So I'm worried. I really think that NA probably eke this out.
See,
Edge.
I when I saw those, so I'm just gonna put the power rankings in chat. I was so amused that these power rankings are so aggressively NA biased, and I wasn't even part of the problem. I'm
made
normally
two?
the biggest part of the problem. As much as I love the Guard, I didn't like. I had Optic one because I gotta have a little NA bias, but I put the Guard middle of the pack. It's their first LAN. Yes, it's their first international LAN. It's such a different experience as a player going across competing in an
Don't listen to him.
Like it's just different. I want them to win the whole dang thing.
We believe in you,
I
MC.
think that even when we were talking to Matt last week, like they're starting out in the bracket, right in the playoff bracket.
Sure.
They're gonna play their first international event, first international game, already in the playoffs against one of the best teams who's qualified through the group. It's a tough spot to start in.
MCE,
Yes.
I'm now taking over as the #1 Guard fan. I'm taking
No.
it
Whoa,
from Mike.
Really?
I had them as #1 on my power rankings.
So did I. After Fnatic
Mike,
lost
you're off
all
the
their
show.
players.
You're out of here. Get out.
Here's the thing. Here's the
Get
thing. As
out.
a true Guard fanboy knows things about what's going on with the team and stuff like that. and like
things.
just about what the first international
Sources, I made it up, bro.
in my heart, the Guard, sure. But when I'm asked to make an objective power ranking, it's not a matter of who's gonna win. It's a matter of who has the most power coming into the event, right? Who has the most heat.
Sure. And I think speaking logistically, I did have Guard at my #1, and it was more than just the NA hope, right? I do think that Guard will there is a strong chance that Guard will struggle, like you said, with their first international LAN, but they've also shown themselves to be a team that very quickly pivots. It's a double elimination bracket. I think they go up against one of the 2-seeded teams, if I'm not mistaken, so they'll go up technically against the weaker teams of one of the groups. I think it depends on who they meet first, right? Like if they get Optic in round 1 of the playoffs, then we're gonna have a problem. If they get Fnatic or Crew in round 1, then they have a problem. But if they get like the 2 seed from Group A, I think that Guard will do extremely well in this tournament.
Moobot just timed out MC, and I can't figure out what
I know.
for.
I have no idea what he said.
Oh, I think it's got to be the #1 thing. They probably thought he was doing a score.
Get owned.
It's got to be the #1. It thought you were posting score spoilers or something. I don't know. It's a phrase 8, but I don't know what phrase 8 is on the Moobot. I don't have that. But that's hilarious. But anyways, he said, I know I have the DMs with one person of the show, and neither of them are the newly self-proclaimed #1.
Fair enough.
This is true.
Fair enough.
This is true. But anyway, like moving on from the Guard specifically, because we should probably talk about some of the other teams that are in this.
Yeah.
And we're still talking about the group. So we talked about Group B. Here's my question to you. 4 teams, 2 make it out. Who's making it out? Sam, go first.
Oh, okay.
Start with Group B.
Hold on. We're still with Group B?
Still with Group
All
B.
right.
Because then we'll talk about Group A and then we'll give our prize.
All right,
making it
Optic
out?
Liquid.
Who's doing it?
Optic Liquid.
Optic
That's
Liquid?
where I'm at.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Bit of hopium on the Liquid, not gonna lie, but
Yeah, I was gonna
Paul,
say.
who you
I'll
got?
admit it.
I would say Optic Crew.
I'm also on
Right.
the Optic Crew train. I'm also
Yeah.
on the
Fair
Optic
enough.
Crew train. Liquid,
thi-
I think Liquid could do it. I think Xerxia could do it, to be quite frank. I don't think they will, but they could.
I think it's rough now that they don't have Patapan. I'm not gonna lie. Watching them
Yeah.
play, like they're still a really good team, but there's some disconnects there.
Obviously, but
Liquid, the thing is, they had a bad playoffs, but they're still like 5 of the best players in the world, really.
Okay.
Like Scream and Navera are still like amazing players, right? Like there's always gonna be a chance that they show up to an international land like this and just play very well.
Yeah.
hope you.
But I think Optic Crew is a realistic pull for this one. We'll see if Sam's EMEA Hopium gets her through it. Group A. Let's talk about Group A. Fnatic, NIP, DRX, Zeta. Definitely the weaker group in a lot of ways. Obviously, it'd be stronger if Fnatic had their full roster. They don't. They potentially have 3 out of 5 of their roster, or 4 out of 5 if Durka can make it. We're not sure on that yet. Obviously, it changes a lot of things if Durka is there or not.
Yeah.
When I made my power rankings, I operated on the assumption that Durka was not. And I think I had them way further down. I think I had them 9th. Yeah, I had them 9th.
Oof.
So it's really tough to make a go at an international event with 3 out of 5 of your roster. If that's the case, I think Fnatic are in major trouble.
Yeah.
And that would be rough for them.
When I did my rankings and it was, but I didn't edit my rankings once we found out about the players who weren't going to be able to make it because I was lazy. So when I did my rankings, I was operating on the assumption that Durka was going to be playing. I had Fnatic at 3rd. I think they still looked unbelievably solid, right? I think if they have 4/5 of their roster, I'm still pretty confident in them doing well.
Yeah.
3/5 is going to be pushing it. I think they can make it out of this group with 3/5. Because I think they still, as much as Valorant is a game about like firepower a lot of the time, it's also a game about tactics. And I think Fnatic have the best tactics in this group. And I'm not even sure how close it is, realistically, outside of maybe DRX. Maybe. But DRX also have some weird rounds where they can just flub really easy stuff that they should be doing properly, in my opinion. So I think Fnatic can still make it out of this group, even if they have 3/5. I'm hoping they have 4/5. Because then if they have 4/5, I think they're out, no problem.
Yeah, I think they're fine. I think it's much easier to play with 1 sub.
If it's 4 out of 5, then I have Fnatic and DRX. If it's 3 out of 5, I still have DRX, but then I'm leaning a little closer to NIP, maybe.
How do we feel about the Snip roster? I'll fully confess at the beginning that I really have not watched them. So does anyone have any knowledge of this NIP team? BR NIP team?
It's some I'm at least vaguely familiar with some of the players. I'm pretty sure we've seen a few of them at internationals before. I think like Zand has been, right? Or
Yeah, I remember him. He was a
Shand?
beast.
I don't know how to pronounce it.
Oh,
Shand,
Shand?
if I remember right.
Yeah,
ZAND?
ZAND.
Old
Yeah.
CS guy.
So, like, they still
He
have
was like the Nats of Brazil. He was like everybody was in love with him.
He's a skilled dude.
Really solid players. I don't know enough about NIP off the top of my head. I think that there is an outside chance they make it out of this group. I think they have a better chance than Zeta Division, but only by a bit.
Okay. How do you feel about Zeta Division? Tell me about the Zeta Division.
Just based on like how they played against Loud at the very least. Zeta Division's a weird team.
Okay.
It's hard for me to judge Zeta Division because they were like hand and foot better than most of Japan, but I think Japan is probably the weakest region of Valorant right now.
I think you keep using hand and foot above. I think the metaphor you're looking for is head and shoulders above.
They both work.
Yeah, they both
hand
work.
and foot's a thing.
Have
Hand and
I
foot's a
not?
thing. I'm like 95% sure. Either way, head and shoulders above. Zeta Division kind of clapped their region for the most part. Like outside of like, I think it was like one match versus Crazy Raccoons that was like a 2-1. Zeta Division did really well. But a lot of those games were very silly. A lot of those rounds were very silly to watch. But they have some cracked aimers. Laz specifically. I watched Laz on the Chamber. I think Laz is going to come out at this LAN and surprise people with how good of a shot he is. The dude is wild with it a lot of the time. So I'm interested to see if they can come up with a surprise. I don't think they will, but they might.
Okay. I like it if we do get there. It certainly does make things spicy. So, I mean, we've kind of already talked about our two teams out. I am going for DRX and NIP. I'm feeling
An
it.
NIP.
An NIP.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's-
I think Fnatic's going to wind up with 3 out of 5 players. This is assuming that Durka doesn't make it. And I
Okay,
think
yeah, then
Fnatic's not going to
that's-
make it. But if Durka's
Okay.
there, I think Fnatic probably makes it out.
Yeah,
I agree with that. Yeah.
The Boaster buff. But yeah, I don't know.
sure.
That's where I'm at with it. Obviously, our teams now waiting direct in the playoffs are the G2, the Guard, Paper Rex, and Loud are all straight up in those playoffs. Here's my question, right? Because we talked about how it's kind of absurd that the 1 seeds just go straight through to playoffs last week. I still think that. Do we think that there is a major separation between these 4 teams and the teams that are in the groups to justify a complete division where they go straight into playoffs?
No.
Not across all 4 teams.
Yeah, not
No.
across all 4. Definitely not. I think you could
Um,
make an argument for the Guard in G2. But for Paper Rex and Loud, I mean, Paper Rex, we saw they were pretty disappointing at their last international event. I mean, I
Yeah.
bought their jersey. I love them. They were great. Benkai is like one of the best players, just in terms of personality. He's amazing. But in terms of performance, we know the smaller regions don't tend to do well. Crew was an outlier, right? They're the exception, not the general rule. So I don't think there's like a huge gap in that regard, but you could definitely make an argument for G2 and the God. And even then, I don't think it would be like enormous.
Yeah, I just don't think it's just weird to me to put teams directly through the playoffs when you only have
Yeah, I
3 international events before your grand final worlds thing, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's weird to give teams such a huge leg up. No judgment on anyone's individual form. It's just like you don't play international events often enough to know that, right? Like you just don't.
And I mean, if we go off the last international events, every region except the EMEA that actually has a bye into playoffs kind of flubbed.
Yeah.
Right. As much as I love NA, I can't say that champions we did all that well. Berlin didn't even go that hot for NA, honestly, outside of like Envy, right? Brazil has been struggling. SEA has had some decent performances, but it didn't come from Paper Rex last time. I think Paper Rex has upgraded a decent amount, I will say. Watching their play, I think Forsaken was always a player that was like one of the standouts in SEA just mechanically, and I think he's really, really driving home that role now. But he's not good enough to just hard diff. Like if Paper Rex go up against Optic or something, or even Fnatic in the first round, this seeding's gonna look very funny.
Yeah. I don't know. It'll be really interesting. It'll be really interesting once we get into those playoffs. The first matches start Sunday, folks. So definitely do tune into Masters. It's going to be spicy. It's going to be fun. International competition's always fun. The stage is always fun. Riot puts on a good show, right? Like
I can't wait to see how the stage looks, man. Every single time it looks so dope.
Personally, I just can't wait for new Boaster Sellies.
True.
That's all I want. Boaster Sellies and entrances.
Fnatic celebrations. Let's go.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll see how those go. But let's move on to our next topic because we do have a couple more events to cover and we're already at the hour mark. So, I mean, we were always going to go over on this episode.
We had a lot to talk about.
So that's fine.
And
we have more to
stuff,
talk about.
yeah.
Let's talk about it. This is the EMEA promotion tournament. It is actively ongoing. Is that match being played out
Yes,
today?
that is. They've just finished today, so these are the updated scores.
Cool. All right. So we can actually talk about this bracket. Big and Focus, which that name is always going to make me want to say something else, are in the upper final. 2 teams make it through. 2 teams qualify back in to VCT. This format is still weird to me. How do we feel? Like, Riot make a normal bracket challenge impossible. But anyway, how are we feeling about how this tournament's playing out? Obviously, Sam, you're covering it, so so why don't you start us out?
I just want to say, like, if you think this is weird, have you seen what they did at the group stages?
Dude,
Because
I know.
Obviously,
I know.
like
I
CAS weren't able to compete, so you have one bracket that's running a straightforward 4-team GSL, and then or GLS, whatever, and then you have another bracket with 3 teams also trying to run out a GSL bracket. It's
Riot
been an adventure.
Please.
Yeah, all of the stuff was last minute and unfortunate, and it kind of is what it is. Also, other fun things. So, Focus 2-0 Supermassive Blaze today, like shortly before we went live, or like as we went live. And the funniest part of that is that the first map, Supermassive Blaze, had to forfeit because one of their players was unable to update their client. And so they were later than 10 minutes to the game, and they had to not sub in their coach, they had to forfeit the map. And then they played the second map, and I mean, to be fair, to Focus's credit, they won. They beat Supermassive Blaze, which is a little surprising to me. I wasn't expecting them because, bearing in mind, Big and Supermassive Blaze dropped down from challengers, so they're the two relegated teams. I was really surprised to see Focus, German team. They've actually been playing with a sub as well, Yugi, who's absolutely cracked. Just been performing incredibly well. So looking forward to seeing their game against Big. Anonymo, yeah, decent team as well. One of these Polish super squads. I've been enjoying watching their play. Surreal knocked out XL, which just depresses me beyond belief. XL was Polaris's last hope, Northern Europe. That was the VRL that I casted, so that didn't go to plan. Obviously, MENA didn't make it through. I say obviously, but it is. It's probably one of the weakest regions across Valorant. So unfortunately, they don't make it. But yeah, I mean, all things considered, I think that this is going more or less how you would expect. It's not tier 1 Valorant. I'll be really straightforward on that one. A lot of it is really scrappy, looks a little puggy, and it's not clean by any measure, but I believe that the experience that these teams are gathering is probably going to be invaluable. I don't know if I I don't know if I necessarily agree with the promotion and relegation system, but at least these teams have an opportunity to compete, and it's not like NA where there's just nothing happening between challenges 1 and 2. So yeah.
Paul, thoughts?
My only thoughts pertaining to this format, I only catch the side eye of that. Like, I was up this morning, so I watched the big Anonymo game, right? But I haven't been able to keep up with the promotional league very closely. My only thoughts is I still think like regional format is weird for like the competitive nature, if that makes sense, of like below the tier 1 scene. Like isolating a lot of these regions to like you can't do like rosters outside of a country or two still feels weird to me. And I don't think any of these teams, even the ones that qualify, are set up well to make big waves in next VCT, right? I don't know if this is a good system to get new blood into VCT that can actually make waves and get toward these international events, if that makes sense.
That's a fair judgment call, because I mean that is sort of the idea of promotional leagues, right? Is you want to if you're, I'll put it this way, I think in an ideal promotion league scheme, you want the two teams that are getting relegated from the top league to be about evenly matched with the top 2 teams coming out of your promotional league, right? If you're going to have turnover and change there. I think in an ideal system, the teams that are coming from the promotion league are actually better, but I think that that's always going to be tricky just because of the level of competition and associated practice that you get once you're in the upper league. But yeah, I mean, at least Supermassive Blaze potentially being moved out of this is interesting and spicy. Hopefully they can turn up with their players on time next time, because that is a stinky way to go out.
Big unlucky.
Hilarious.
Big unlucko. As a CS guy, it's cool to see Yugi popping off. Yugi was at one point a promising Danish opera in CS, who then kind of face planted when given top end opportunities and had their star just completely fade, and no one was really that interested in. So Yugi moved to Valorant, came back to CS, and is now back in Valorant, I guess. But there was like a period of flirting both directions there.
Yeah.
So if Yugi's crushing it on a team, that's cool.
What is interesting is that Focus, they come from the German VRL, but they only had 2 German players. Yeah. And I don't know what's happened to Kuba, who is their usual player. I didn't go and check it out. I don't know if he's sick. I don't know. I don't know why, but he has obviously now been subbed out for Yugi, which means that they no longer meet the German VRL requirements.
Yeah,
but see, they got through the VRL. That's the only thing you needed the requirements for. Now you're in international.
It's so weird, right?
It's really weird.
This system is very strange.
It's why nationality requirements in esports don't make sense.
Yeah.
They don't they never made sense in they don't make sense in most like if you want to do like what Overwatch does, where you or used to do they still do the World Cup?
That's
Yeah.
the last one was in
Well,
2019.
they would, in theory, if Overwatch ever played.
Okay, good to know. So like the Overwatch World Cup used to be hype because it was players from professional teams then forming nationality
Yeah,
teams
exactly.
for one
Yes.
event, which was
That's
cool,
cool, yeah.
right? Where it's like it's a different thing. You get to see your, it's like the Olympics. That
Yeah,
kind of thing
exactly.
is cool.
Yeah.
But
That's one thing.
making professional rosters maintain nationality rosters is
And-
always a bad idea that limits proper builds.
Especially when it's not even like the professional rosters necessarily. Like it's not the tier 1 rosters that have to do this.
It's the upcoming.
Yeah.
It's the guys who are trying to beat them, right?
So then it's
they
like,
have to,
yeah.
they're limited in their talent pool on how they can actually try and build their roster. It's such a strange
And
system.
this roster move
Yeah.
from Focus is exposing the fallacy with it, where it's like, okay, well, we qualified through the league, and now get out of here. We don't need your passport anymore.
So
Get the
weird.
hell out of the team. Bring in Yugi, and he's gonna drop 25. Yeah, yeah. I think a lot of esports have gone through this at various times, and
Mhm.
we'll see how long it sticks around with the regional formats.
Yeah.
But yeah. Let's talk about Game Changers. Game Changers is hitting playoffs. Game
Yeah.
Changers playoffs is this weekend. Pretty spicy there. They
It
played
starts
through
today, I think.
2 rounds of
Should
qualifiers to
start.
get this
Yeah.
bracket. So yeah, starts today. Starts at 4 p.m. Definitely tune in to Game Changers to watch Cloud9 White and CLG Red. That's a really good first round matchup, isn't it?
That is crazy. Yeah.
Honestly, all 8 of these, like I want to watch all these matches, dude. Like
Agreed.
all 8 of these teams are pretty damn good. Cool to see Dart Monkeys get in there too, right?
So
like the only
cool,
unsigned
right?
Roster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really neat. Like
They
literally.
recently, they just won the
Sorry, go.
Game Changers Academy as well.
Mhm.
So, I mean, they come into this as like a super dark horse underdog, and I wasn't even sure that they'd make it this far. So, I'm really impressed to see how far they can go with this.
Sure. And I mean, I don't even follow Game Changers as closely as you do, obviously, Sam. But even I have like 1 or 2 players on every single one of these teams where I'm like, yeah, let's go. I like to see them succeeding. So like it's just super dope to see. And like these matches have been pretty sick too. I'm super excited for this to start up.
My biggest heartbreak is Exet female, please change
Sure.
your name. Because obviously they've got the 2 EU players and they had to play from EU, so 100 ping demons, and that was always going to be tough. And then they wind up coming up against Shopify Rebellion. And what are the chances that the newly formed or newly changed or whatever team is going to come out on top of that one? So that was a little bit sad for me.
Sure.
Dignitas beating Misfits was pretty cool. I'm glad to see Dignitas back on a bit of a tear, because it seemed like they'd hit a bit of a dip. So it's nice to see them back on top. And obviously Version X, I'm super excited to see what's happening there. They lost to Cloud9.
They've lost to Cloud9 twice.
Yes.
Yeah.
There
That was
you
their
go.
only losses, I'm pretty sure.
There you go. So, I mean, they're like a really big front runner to potentially, maybe not win the whole thing because they've lost to Cloud9 twice, but to do really well.
And I mean,
I'm really happy
they're-
for Anders.
Their first matchup here is against Shopify as well, which let's just talk about that. So the story of Game Changers through its entire life so far has been Cloud9 White dominating, right? Like
Yeah.
that has been the primary storyline. And again, they haven't dropped a map so far in this run. They've been steamrolling teams. But this time, there's another steamroller, and they haven't come up against each other yet, and they're the 1 and the 2 seed in this bracket, which sets up a really cool storyline, because
Yeah.
Shopify also haven't dropped a map and have also steamrolled pretty much everyone on their path through here. So,
I really like Shopify too.
fingers
Dude, I
crossed
love
for a
them.
Shopify C9 White upper final.
I've been following KP for a while. She's great. She's wild, dude. Like some of the some of the strats that KP comes up with. I always like watching a KP team because they just do some off the wall kind of stuff and it works.
That does sound
It's
like
so
KP.
much fun to watch Shopify.
I met KP at a Cali LAN in like 2018, 19,
Sure.
in the before times when we had local LANs
In
regularly.
the before
dark
time.
Or the not as dark times.
But yeah, no, it's I don't know. I think this is a really entertaining Game Changers, and despite
Absolutely.
having a format where it's a qualifier into a qualifier, which feels like a lot,
Which was a little strange. I will say that.
I think it's actually worked out very nicely with the teams that we've got.
Yeah.
Would you all agree?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
I honestly think that this is the best representation of the best talent that the NA women's scene has right now. Obviously, a couple of teams could have kind of like a knife's edge thing.
Mhm.
But if they had been in instead of like one of these 2 teams, we could be saying the same thing. Like, this is just a really
Yeah.
good representation of the best. There isn't a team in here that makes me go, how did you
How'd
get
they get
here?
here? Exactly. And last week, Mike, Yumi, and MCE were talking about how we were a little bit confused because it seemed like the last day of Game Changers playoffs was going to overlap with the first day of
Yeah,
Iceland.
they moved
It
it.
does.
Looks like the schedule's moved.
Oh, they
so
moved
They
it
moved
finishes
it
a day earlier now.
And it didn't get
So-
announced anywhere. Like people were like, Jess
Nope,
tweeted
it
about
just
it. She's like,
happened.
by the way, guys, this has been moved up, so you should probably be aware of that.
Yep.
Probably should have publicized that, right? Probably
Would
should
have
have
been
publicized
nice.
that.
Yeah.
Probably should have. But hey, at least they're not gonna cause themselves massive logistical issues because we were gonna rant about how dumb that was on this show,
Yeah.
like we did last
That's
week.
true.
Okay, that's good. Because we were even looking at this last night when we were doing like our pre-prod meeting for this, where I was talking with Cody about like times on it, and it was only
Mhm.
supposed to be like a 2-hour window between the last game of VCT and the first game of Game Changer, or
Which
the
is-
final of Game Changer. And it's like, oh yeah, the first day of your international event, you expect to go on time, to run on time. You expect that the first
Imagine.
day of an international LAN. I'll give you a hint, in esports that doesn't happen. Like
Nope.
there's always delays.
Yeah, very true.
Always, especially on the first day. So glad they moved it. Wish they told anyone. But hey, at least it gets
Jess
Sunday.
tweeted about it. We got that.
It will be a little rough for the obviously whoever comes from the lower bracket's gonna have to play 2 series in a day. But
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that final best of 5 as well?
let me see.
Oh,
Yes.
surely not.
Yep, it is.
Oh.
It's a best of 5.
Upper bracket
Presumably it's a best of
advantage?
5. You have to have map advantage, right?
Yeah, I
If you-
mean,
if there's an upper
I
and a
would
lower.
hope so.
Yeah,
There
Have
should
we
be a map
seen-
advantage.
Have we seen a Riot event where they had map advantage
yes.
in upper bracket?
Yes.
Because
In,
that wasn't a thing in
VR.
VCT.
You're
It
right.
was in
Usually it's
VRL. It
it's
was
just
in
a
VRL.
veto advantage, but there
It
should
was in
be.
VRL. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully.
Which
that's
was
what we
really
got
funny
going
though,
on.
because none of the teams knew about it. It was in the Polaris VRL, and on the day, Tundra and XL found out, hey guys, best of the grand final is a best
I
of 5
find-
with a 1 map advantage, and everyone was like, "Excuse me."
A
'Cause it
little bit
wasn't in the rule
anecdotal
book.
though. Oh, it wasn't in the rule.
It
Never
wasn't in
mind
the rule
then.
book.
Never
Well, I
mind.
mean, you
then.
can't-
I was gonna say
scoured
teams don't
through
read
it.
that the rule book for that, but never
There you
mind.
go.
Then. Never mind. That's wild.
That was fun.
Growing pains as people figure out how to run tournament
Growing
brackets.
pain. Yeah, tell me about it.
It's been a few years now. We gotta get out of some of these growing pains, eh? Look at calendars when you plan your events. That's always a good one. That's always a key
Yeah.
one. But anyway, this should be really fun. I think that this is
Absolutely.
also going to be a great warm up for people for then into VCT action, right? Where NA Game Changers is usually pretty dang entertaining. So and the narrative of Cloud9 White and Shopify hopefully meeting in the upper bracket is going to be just like
I love how you
storyline.
phrase that like all
Oh, yeah.
other game changers aren't that entertaining.
I haven't watched other Game Changers, so I wouldn't know. No,
We
I
just
tune
don't-
into the
yeah, we
EU
don't
once
reference.
every once in a while. But like, I don't know. I always enjoy watching C9 White just go out and talk shit on Twitter and
Oh God,
and
yes.
things like that.
That always starts so much drama.
So there's always at least 1 or 2 good Twitter drama threads out from these, combined with the actual broadcast. So yeah, should be a good time. Definitely tune into that later today. I think shockingly.
Yeah, that should.
Oh, go ahead, Sam.
No, just I'm surprised that we've managed to not go like an hour and a half overtime.
I was gonna say.
Bro, we need a 6-hour press forward to Defuse special.
Please, just
of
one,
these
just one.
days.
Christmas special,
one.
6 hours of us just talking
Perfect.
shit.
I'm almost sad that I was limiting you on time. I figured these last 2 topics would take us at least half an hour to get through.
Now you look like a fool.
I've
for
gotten
like
yelling
used
at
to
me
you
earlier.
stifling me, so I've gotten better at cutting my fucking.
I
page
was doing
short.
it to Paul today. I'm
is true.
equal in
I
my
know,
you guys
I know.
talk too damn
And
long.
I spent the whole time going.
But I just
Know
think it's
my
funny when I'm
pain.
like, you have 30 seconds, and then your like point is clearly not designed to fit into 30 seconds. It's like, all right, hard cut.
Thank you so much.
But anyway, thank you so much for tuning in, everyone. One day we'll learn how to make points concisely. It's an ongoing effort in the war against bloated conversation topics.
We're against our own brains.
against
Our
our
own
own
tangents.
brains. But thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you all next week for more Valorant esports news and discussion. We'll have lots of Master stuff to talk about next week. We'll have lots of Game Changers results to talk about next week. It'll be a pretty spicy episode, I think. And as always, this was episode 69. So nice, everybody, and we'll see you next week.
Nice.
Peace out.